Get ready for a blitz battle for the ages. This is Duda versus Mamedyarov, a game packed with brilliant sacrifices, shocking blunders, and non-stop tactical action. White opens with pawn to d4, and after knight to f6 we see the Trompowsky attack with bishop to g5, and right away, Mamedyarov complicates with pawn to d5. A brilliant sacrifice. Here's the idea. After white plays pawn to e3, the knight jumps into e4. White tries to kick it with pawn to h4, but pawn to f6 holds everything together, giving black fantastic compensation. White accepts the challenge, taking the knight on f6. Black recaptures with the pawn, and the next few moves solidify the pawn structures as both sides continue to develop their pieces. The maneuvering continues. Both players bring their knights into the game, with black establishing a strong pawn on f5, controlling key central squares as the middle game takes shape. White now breaks on the queen side with pawn to c4. Black captures, white recaptures with the knight, and after a few more developing moves from both sides, black's king castles to safety on the king side. White follows suit, castling kingside. Rooks enter the game on the open files, and both players are now fully mobilized for the coming battle, and here it is. Another stunner from Mamedyarov, bishop to d5. A second brilliant sacrifice, this time aimed at removing white's key light-squared bishop to open lines for his queen. White has no choice but to accept the sacrifice, taking the bishop. Black recaptures with the queen and immediately launches a pawn storm on the king side with pawn to h5. The tension is electric. White creates counterplay on the queen side, while black's h-pawn charges forward, ripping open the cover around the white king by taking the pawn on g3. White recaptures the pawn on g3, and after black's knight lands on d5, white immediately fires back on the queen side with the pawn push to b5. The queenside pressure builds, rooks pile onto the open files, pawns are exchanged, and both players jockey for position, with black's king carefully stepping up to g7. The position is on a knife's edge. White repositions the rook to b1, black's knight hops to b6, and white's queen infiltrates deep into black's camp, landing on a6. And here, with the pressure mounting, black makes an inaccurate move, letting the advantage slip. He had a much stronger way to continue the attack. The best move was rook to h8, keeping the kingside pressure alive. After pawn to a5, black continues with pawn to f4. Knight takes the pawn on f4, and bishop takes the knight on f4, winning material. But in the game, black pushes the pawn to c5, and the opportunity is gone. White immediately takes the pawn on c5, and black's bishop recaptures. But now it's white's turn to miss a golden opportunity. He could have secured a winning advantage here, but plays an inaccurate move. The killer move was pawn to a5. After knight to d5, the rook swings to b7. Queen to c6 is forced, and queen takes queen on c6 simply wins black's queen. But back in the actual game, white plays knight to f4, and suddenly black is right back in it. Black's queen slides to c6, and white's knight hops to h4, rebalancing the position. Unbelievable. A third brilliant move from Mamedyarov. Knight takes the pawn on a4, a stunning sacrifice to deflect the white queen and win a pawn in the resulting endgame. White is forced to trade, and queen takes the queen on c6, and black's recapture, rook takes the queen on c6, is a fantastic move, the only one that keeps the advantage. And here's the point. If white's rook goes to a1 to challenge the knight, black's rook swings to e4. After knight to f3, the bishop drops to b6, and black's position is clearly better. White plays rook to b7, but this is an inaccuracy. The better move was rook to a1 to immediately challenge that dangerous knight, and this slip allows black to increase the pressure. But black misses the chance to fully punish white's error. He had a move here that would have caused huge problems. The best move was knight to c3. After rook to a1, black plays rook to d6. Following knight to f3, the knight jumps to e4, and white is in serious trouble. Instead of that, black plays rook to e7, letting white off the hook and trading rooks. White obliges with rook takes rook on e7, and black's recapture, bishop takes the rook on e7, is another great find. It's the only move that maintains a slight edge in this complicated endgame. Now the endgame maneuvering begins. White brings the rook to b7, black's bishop finds an active square on c5, and white's knight leaps into the attack, landing on g5. And this is the moment the game turns for good. Black's king steps to f8, a critical inaccuracy. King to f6 was much safer, and now white can launch a winning attack. And here it comes. White's rook takes the pawn on f7 with check, winning material and tearing open the king's defenses. Under immense pressure, black's king makes another inaccurate step. There was a better defensive try. The best chance was king to g8. After knight to d5, Bishop to d8, rook takes pawn on a7, black can take the knight on g5, winning material back. But in the game, black's king moves to e8, and now white's advantage becomes completely decisive. White tightens the screws with rook to g7, while black makes a last-ditch effort with the pawn push to a5. But it's too little, too late. White's knight simply snaps off the pawn on g6, and the material advantage is sealed. And this is the final decisive mistake. Black is lost, but there was one move to prolong the fight. The only try was rook to c7, even after rook to g8 check, king to d7, and rook to f8. Black is still fighting. He can play rook to c5. But instead, black plays bishop to c5, and this allows a forced win. And Duda finishes it off beautifully, starting with rook to g8 check. The black king is caught in a net. After this move, Mamedyarov resigned. What a game. 3 brilliant sacrifices from black weren't enough, as a series of late errors allowed Duda to turn the tables and secure the victory.